Okay, hello, welcome back to the Tuesday Counseling Podcast. I'm joined by wonderful friends and colleagues, Erin and Avery, as always. We have a very special guest, Miss Vanessa Vaughter. Woo! How are you doing, Vanessa? Thank you for being here.
I am super excited to be here. I really appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. Vanessa, for those of you who don't know, is basically, how would you describe Vanessa? Y'all, an EMDR god?
Guru. Yeah.
Yeah.
Knower of all things.
Knower of all things.
Oh my goodness, no.
When we worked at the center, Vanessa would come into the front office where Avery and Madeline and I worked, and I would just try to think of questions and ways to keep Vanessa in the office for as long as humanly possible.
You did.
And you always had great answers and great advice and great suggestions and very cool things to tell.
Well, thank
Great
you.
stories. Yeah. And a
Y'all
great
were a
teacher.
super fun group.
So yeah, we know Vanessa from the time where we all worked at the same practice together, where Avery and Vanessa are currently working, which is the Center for Integrative Counseling in Dallas. But yeah, Vanessa, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the profession. Tell us your story a little bit.
Great story.
The shortened version, I left the corporate training world and decided that I was being called to do something else, and went back to get my master's in social work at 45, and swore I would never be a therapist. Was going to do community practice and advocacy and that kind of stuff. And then worked for a domestic violence agency and doing education, public education about TV. And they needed somebody to do the teen group. Well, I'd been a youth minister in another former life, and so I took it on. And then one thing led to another, and they needed an individual to do. They had a couple of clients that they needed individual counseling for, and they said, "You can do it. You've already, you'll be fine." I was like, "I didn't train for this," and they were like, "You'll be fine. You'll be fine." So that's how I got into it, and haven't looked back. So I realized pretty quickly, working with that population, that EMDR would be something very helpful. And I had been a client of EMDR and in a different former life, and found it incredibly healing. So I convinced the CEO to get us some training. And so I completed EMDR basic training in 2014 and knew from day one that I wanted to be a trainer. And because I love training, I love sharing information and seeing light bulbs go off in people's eyes, and to be able to share this just incredibly powerful, efficient, effective way of helping people who've been survivors of trauma and suffered for too long. I was all in. So,
Wow,
yeah.
it's really amazing.
And I don't know if we said this, but I know Madeline and I have talked about the EMDR training that we did with Vanessa. Vanessa was our trainer. So maybe you said that in the beginning, Madeline. But just to finish the circle,
Yes, that was a super fun class.
it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we just wrapped that up. Was it last weekend?
Last weekend.
Wow. Okay.
That feels like forever ago. Yeah.
Right?
It does. But yeah, Avery and I went through a really cool training process, which Erin is about to go and do the exact same one
Yay!
at the end of the month.
So fun.
Maybe.
And it was 3 weeks from Thursday, so 2.5 weeks now.
End of May.
Wow. So yeah. So I mean, I'm assuming like if someone clicked on this episode, they may either know what EMDR is and they want to hear more about it, or they're like, oh my God, what is that? Like, I wonder what EMDR is. So
Right.
I wonder if it would feel not too much like putting you on the spot, Vanessa, but like elevator pitching EMDR for us and not making me and Avery do it because you're
You're the
the
expert.
one who knows better, probably.
Please. Well, so EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing is what it stands for. Interestingly, As time has gone on, we've realized it's not about necessarily just the eye movements. There's other ways to do that dual attention stimulus and get same results. But it started back in 1987, 88. This woman, Francine Shapiro, the story goes she was walking through a park and had just gotten some really disturbing news about her cancer diagnosis. And she noticed that her eyes were moving back and forth really quickly. And then as she walked and her eyes were moving back and forth, she started to feel better. So she, I think, magically went from that to trying it with colleagues and seeing if they thought of something disturbing and then moved their eyes back and forth, if they felt better. And they couldn't quite get the eye movements down. So she started moving her fingers and having them follow her fingers. And that's how it began. Initially, the thought was she theorized that it was desensitizing the emotional and the physical reaction or reactivity to bringing up the memory of the disturbing event. Then she realized as she started teaching others how to do this, oh, wait, something actually is changing in the brain when we do this. So there's a physiological shift. So if you look at a MRI of a brain before EMDR and after EMDR, there literally are physical changes. It's rewiring the brain, connecting. I talk about it kind of as a trauma trance. Something really bad happens, and trauma by definition is something that is just completely overwhelming, and we can't make sense of it in our head or in our body, and it's emotionally just flooding. At that moment, we develop a belief about ourselves, and it can get stuck in our trauma trance. And so EMDR just taps into that memory network, and it is a network. It's not any one place in the brain. It's all over. And it takes those neural networks that are attached to that trauma and helps loosen them, for lack of a better word, so that they can then make new connections. So you see a client go from I'm worthless or I'm in danger, and then through the reprocessing of EMDR, they move to, oh, I'm valuable, or I can keep myself safe. And if you change someone's, if their brain, it's not me that's changing them, their brain changes from how they see themselves as a loser to then seeing themselves as confident and valuable and having something to offer the world. Oh my gosh, everything changes. How they see themselves, how they interact with other people, how they do their jobs, how they relate to their kids, and the ripple effect is just amazing.
I think about Inside Out.
Yes.
Very not therapy jargon way to talk about this. If you've ever seen Inside Out, and the way that at the end of the day, Joy goes and like stomps on the little thing and goes, we're sending these things to long term. EMDR is like if those little balls of memories get like all backed up and jumbled up and they can't go to long term, right?
Right.
And the process of EMDR is getting them all sorted out and then being able to send them to long term.
Yes. And you remember the little balls that go through those gutter things?
Mm-hmm.
So I think of it as one of those balls. When trauma happened, it formed, but it was misshapen and bigger than it could fit in that little gutter. And so it couldn't flow through like it was supposed to. And so that memory didn't get processed the way going to the grocery store did, or even something exciting like graduating. And it got stuck. And so with EMDR, we basically take that ball out, we polish it up, shift it, reshape it, and then when we take the reactivity down out of it, it kind of shrinks down to the right size. Then it gets back on that trolley and it goes straight through, and then it can do whatever it needs to do. So I love that analogy, Erin. Clients can relate to that really well, because it's so fun that we've got a movie that's solid, that's well done and theoretically well done, that we can use it, have a common language with our clients.
Totally. The amount of times that I've had a client come in and be like, especially when Inside Out 2 came out over the summer last year,
Anxiety.
the amount of clients that I had come in that were like, have you seen Inside Out 2?
Mhm.
And they're able to talk about their experience
Yeah.
by way of seeing the movie and saying like, this so well depicted my experience
Mhm.
of what I'm going through. And it just makes the language and the conversation between clients and clinicians, I think, so much easier.
Absolutely. I had a client come in and say, have you seen Inside Out 2? And I was like, no, I've seen the first one, but I haven't seen the second one. That is your homework this week.
Ooh, okay.
I take homework from my clients.
That's so great. Yeah, I mean, I think that piece that Erin highlighted is definitely the way that I have been pitching it. And that seems to resonate with a lot of people, like, and especially the fact of you can still access that memory. It's not like it's disappeared from your memory.
Great
It's
point,
still
Madeline.
there, but it's maybe not full of the charge that it once had or the negative cognition about you that it once had.
Exactly. If we wanted to take the analogy a little further, maybe that ball is not only misshapen and big, but it also has charge to it.
Hmm.
Like if you were to touch it, it would shock you and send vibrations throughout your body, because trauma is a very physical experience as well as emotional. And so if we can reduce that tension and teach your body that what you're reacting to is actually the memory of how you reacted, and it's an illusion. So it's kind of like watching, if you go and watch a scary movie, I'm going to date myself here. So if you're watching Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy Krueger with all his, yeah, Aaron's laughing at me. So you can sit and watch that movie and you can feel it in your body, kind of things. At the same time, part of your brain knows, I don't have to be afraid. I'm safe sitting in my living room watching a really scary thing. And that's what a lot of times, if we can help shift that mindset in clients of, hey, what you're reacting to is not that it's actually happening right now, which is what your brain's telling you, but you're actually just reacting. It's an illusion. And you're responding to and feeling the body sensations and the emotions that you felt back then, but it's not happening anymore and you're safe now.
So Madeline had a conversation with one of our lovely clinicians that we have found on TikTok, Emily, and they had a conversation about IFS last Friday.
Awesome.
And I know that you love to kind of talk about IFS and EMDR, and kind of couple them together in certain ways. Can you talk about how the two kind of came together for you and how they kind of make sense in your brain?
Yeah. So I have to take a step back from IFS. And in EMDR, there are always new approaches that are being looked at, and attachment is a struggle. So if you've got a client who has complex PTS or complex trauma, if you just do the standard protocol of EMDR, you might get stuck. And then people are like, well, this doesn't work. I'm not going to do it anymore. But what we found is if you work with the attachment part first, then you can work with the traumatic memories and they clear much easier. So there's a protocol that was developed called the Developmental Needs Met Strategy, DNMS. And in summary, it helps you work with a client to create a circle of loving, caring, nurturing people around them. And then they create this super special place that's fun for their littles to play. And you build a relationship between those two. And while it's imaginary, the connection that the brain makes and feeling those relationships is very real. So once they know that they can be safe and that they have people that are going to be loving and nurturing rather than blaming and shaming, things can shift. So that taught me about younger parts and littles, as I call them. Well, then a colleague, y'all know her, Rosa Richards, came to me and said, "Hey, have you read this book called IFS?" And I was like, "What?" So just happen to have it right here. Ta-da. Dick Schwartz, free advertisement. You're welcome, Dick. Um, and so I started reading it, and I was like, this makes a lot of sense. So he talks about parts, and we all have parts of us. And since y'all already talked about IFS, I won't go into that, because if you don't know what we're talking about, you can go back and listen to the previous podcast, which I'm
That's
going to
right.
do.
All the ads.
But what I find helpful is working with the parts, particularly that are protective, that are the ones that are keeping the client stuck in a lot of ways. Even though they're trying to protect and help, they don't realize that the way they're doing that is actually keeping the client stuck. So once I can help the client's self energy connect with that protector and understand what the protector's concerns are, oh, well, I'm afraid that if you do this, then that memory, that exiled part is just going to flood the system, and it's going to take over, and then it's just going to destroy us, and I can't ever, put it back together. So if we can help that protector begin to trust the client's self, that, hey, we're not going to let that happen. We have ways that we can help the exile not need to do that. Then the protectors begin to relax inside and give us access to the exile. Once we have access in IFS, you would move to an unburdening process, which can be very effective, but not always. So that's when I bring in the EMDR and focus on that memory and the worst part of that memory, the thoughts, the emotions, the body sensations, all of that. And then we reprocess that memory, clear that out, come to where the client can have that positive belief about themselves and their body scan is clear. And then we go back and check in with the protectors to see how they're doing, if they saw what happened, if they're okay with it, or if they still have concerns. So that's one way I use it. I'm heading out Wednesday to my final 4 days of level 1 IFS training, and I have a lot of colleagues in that training that also do EMDR. So we're actually forming a group to talk about ways that we've used them together. And I look forward to learning more, because some of them have said, as we've chatted online, have said that they find EMDR helpful to find the exiles, which I have not used it for. Yeah, Madeline, I completely agree. I'm very curious. So part of me is that self energy is coming out and like, tell me more. So yeah, I look forward to hearing how they're doing it.
That's fascinating. I wouldn't have thought that, but now that you say that, if we're looking for maybe a negative cognition that we have about ourselves as a result of trauma, you could look at that as an exile part.
Or it might be a protector part that is saying you're worthless. And if that part is in, I think of IFS as like a conference table or a picnic table, and somebody's at the head of the table. So, and they kick the exile and they kick the self out and they take over. And if that part that took over is saying, you're nothing, you'll never be anything, and it's constantly telling those negative thoughts, well, that can be a protector, because as long as I think I'm nothing, then I'm not going to venture out and put myself at risk.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as I don't put myself at risk, I'm going to stay reserved and quiet and safe. And those exiles are going to stay in their place. So I can see it working both ways. Yeah. So, great question, Erin.
Yeah. That is really interesting, kind of knowing that there's sort of a marriage that you can find between those two theories. I think they work really well together.
That's funny that you use that analogy, because one of my colleagues that when we first started talking about EMDR and IFS, she said, I feel like I'm kind of betraying my EMDR world. So we've decided that it's not that we're betraying either partner. We're just bringing them together and making a really great marriage.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. Well, I
But
love
you do have to have the skill set and the basic training in each before you bring them together. So
that.
as I say in my trainings a lot, that first weekend we teach you how to color between the lines. And then the second weekend you begin to recognize that you can do some creative things, kind of like the artwork in Avery's background, to paint outside the lines and begin to go with your hunches with cognitive interweaves and things.
Mhm. It's really cool. I'm thinking about maybe people listening that understand EMDR, that have practiced it for a while, are excited to maybe hear a little bit more in depth of like, okay, how I'm thinking like if you're able to share maybe success stories, not in a way that would give away any client information, but just like what you've been able to see as a result of practicing EMDR that continues your belief in its efficacy.
Yeah. So this is a client from years ago from the DV agency. She and her boys had been forced to go to an emergency shelter, and then by the time she became our client at the agency, I didn't work in the shelter. I worked in the office and saw clients there. But she had completely lost everything, and with the exception of her job, she still had her job. So as we did EMDR on some of the targets of abuse, she felt, to use IFS language, herself, her ego state got stronger and stronger, to the point that she was able to buy a house. She and her sons moved into the house. She redecorated it herself, like painted and did all these things. And with every one of those steps, she began to feel stronger and stronger, right? Because she's accomplishing things. Whereas before, she was so shattered and shut down that she wasn't really able to be there like she wanted to be for her boys. So
Yeah,
that was pretty amazing.
I think
The ripple effects
Mhm.
of that is huge.
it's so amazing. And I think when you're a clinician who works in the space of trauma, this is, I mean, really why I prefer, not prefer, why I really enjoy working with trauma over maybe something like anxiety or a different
Yeah.
clinical presentation. I feel like trauma is really measurable when your therapy is working,
Yes.
quote unquote.
Yes.
I feel like you're kind of describing that feeling as a clinician of being like,
Oh,
cool, like this is working, this is helping.
absolutely. So I don't think I said it in y'all's training. I may have, but I I am a lazy therapist. And by that I mean using EMDR, the client's brain does all the work. So all I have to do is hold that sacred space so that they feel safe, and then I guide them through the process, but their brain is what really does the work. So at the end of the day, if I've had, 4 or 5 EMDR sessions, a lot of people are like, God, how did you do that? You've got trauma after trauma after trauma. I'm like, yes. And I know I can help them. And because it's them working so hard, even harder, you know, I don't have to work as hard with EMDR as I do with IFS.
Mhm.
And it's not to say I don't stay attuned. You absolutely have to stay attuned to your client so that you can read what's going on. But as far as I don't have to think of the right question, I don't have to come up with the right paraphrase. I just follow the 8 phases. And like I said, I've been doing this now for 11 years, and it still works.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. So at the end of the day, usually, um, I come home feeling pretty chill.
Yeah.
Now there are times I don't want to paint this as a magic potion. Um, I did have one client after we did EMDR. She came back the next session. She said, "Did you give me a lobotomy?" I was like, "No,
Nope.
not give me a lobotomy." But that's how much different she felt internally. And we talked about how, as you said earlier, the memory's still there. It just doesn't have that charge to where you don't want to go near it.
Yeah.
Um, So I find that when it works, it is almost magical. However, particularly if you're working with complex PTS clients or clients with a history of child's physical or sexual abuse, neglect, it's not, hey, come in for 6 sessions, you'll be cured, and go live your life.
Yeah.
Which I think is sometimes how some therapists who haven't been trained in EMDR think of it,
Yeah.
which is problematic. I had a therapist refer a client to me, and I didn't know the therapist at all, just kind of out of the blue, but she saw that I did EMDR. So the client came in and did the usual intake, stability, making sure that they weren't reactive and that kind of thing. And the first few sessions went great. And she had some memory of some abuse, but she didn't really remember exactly what. Well, you can still do EMDR with that. But the first time that we started the protocol, she brought up the memory and described it, a few features of it. And then I said, what words go with the negative belief about yourself when you focus on that moment? And she instantly, an alter came forward and said, I don't have a negative memory. I know exactly what he needs. I know how to service him. And I was like, okay. So therapist had not let me know that this client had already been diagnosed with DID. That's kind of important.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be overcome within 6 sessions. So EMDR can be incredibly helpful with DID, and it needs to go much more slowly because all the parts have to be on board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's kind of my question is I have heard stories from clients and from people in my personal life who have gone in for EMDR and it has just gone terribly,
Really
terribly wrong. And they feel like they just touched a hot stove and they don't want to try it again. And knowing what I know about, how helpful it can be, it's like, oh, I hate that you had that experience. And so how do you measure, I guess, readiness for EMDR? Who is a good candidate for EMDR?
Well, Avery and Madeline could answer this question. First of all, you go to basic training and you learn what needs to be in place within the client before you start waving your fingers. We actually had a woman in our class last session who had been a victim of really bad EMDR therapy, not once, but twice, I think.
Yeah.
So it's the therapist's responsibility to help the client get to a place where they're ready to reprocess a trauma memory. Trauma, by definition, is painful. And if you have not built rapport with the client to the point that they really trust that you're going to keep them safe, if you haven't taught them and they've practiced emotional regulating tools, some as basic as 4 square breathing, but then we also, in the training, you learn about calm place, which lots of people do. Calm place, go to your happy place. But with EMDR, we add some stuff to it so that it gets really settled into the body, not just the mind. And then you want to be sure that they're in a stable place in their life setting, and make sure that they are able to handle those intense emotions. So we talked about the window of tolerance, and you need, as the clinician, to be able to recognize, is the client within the window of tolerance? Now, back to my DID story a moment ago. I had no idea because she presented as being completely stable. She was going to college. She had support system. But we soon found out that that wasn't all of it. So the part that came to therapy and she was ready to do EMDR. But as soon as we touched that hot spot, her system said, nope, not going there.
Mm.
So you do have to be intentional about preparing the client. If you're working with a client who has a history of substance abuse or eating disorders, EMDR can be incredibly helpful, but you ethically must let them know, hey, EMDR, your brain kind of does the work, and sometimes really big emotions come up that you don't expect. Now, in the past, when those big emotions came up, your way of shutting those down, firefighter in IFS,
Mhm.
was to use so that you didn't have to feel anything. Understandable, because you just wanted everything to stop. As we step into this process, some of those big feelings may come up. So we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that when that happens, it doesn't get so large that you go outside of your window of tolerance. And we're going to give you tools to recognize when that's happening and what to do to bring yourself back.
Okay.
So it's really important that the clinician prepare the client.
Mm-hmm. And
And
then
for the
go Eve.
Oh, I was going to say, and for the clinician to go through a formal training, right? Like going in person, it's an extensive, even basic training to have the resources to be able to set your client up for success. But also for the therapist to feel confident going into session of, I can hold this space for you. I think that that's something, I know there are lots of different trainings, and I will say I've only done Vanessa's training, but of how helpful that was, of like, I feel prepared in the room to show up and hold that safe space. And so just
Yeah,
going in prepared.
great point. Because if my system isn't able to tolerate my client's distress,
Mhm.
then I am not serving them.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that I'm in a place that I'm grounded, that I am clear in my headspace and completely attuned to the client. And we all know some days that's a bit more challenging than others.
Of
So,
course.
yeah, yeah.
So if we have someone listening to this right now who is thinking about EMDR or, seeking out potentially that modality of therapy, I know Emdria is a great resource, but how would you encourage people to look for, to find EMDR clinicians, or kind of how to sift through? There's so many people that offer EMDR. Um, what is, in your opinion, going to give them like the best bet of, working with someone who is well trained, formally trained, who really is just
Yeah.
going to give them the best chance for success?
I'm not saying that anyone trained outside of EMDRIA doesn't know what they're doing. However, when I've talked to clients or other therapists who have had bad experiences, their therapist was not through the EMDRIA. So EMDR International Association is one of two. There's the EMDR Institute as well. So I would say if you're looking for an EMDR therapist, go to emdria.org. There's a button right up top, find a therapist. When you go there, you can search by location. Um, I think you can even search by insurance, but I wouldn't swear to that. What you want to look for, though, is someone who's certified. So Avery and Madeline have been through basic training. That means they've learned the protocol, they've learned what to do in certain situations, but they haven't practiced it with actual clients for very long. So they're going to have stuff that comes up that if they're anything like I was when I first got trained, it's like, oh crap, what do I do with this? And the answer is you go back to Target and then you shut it down and do Calm Place. But um, the experience of being in the room with clients over and over and over and seeing having curveballs thrown at you and navigating those successfully is so important. A
Mhm.
certified EMDR therapist is going to have done um, 20 additional hours of consultation with um, a certified consultant. And they've worked with a minimum of 25 different clients, done a minimum of 50 different sessions. So they've got lots of experience handling those one-off situations of, oh, this happened, or my client completely abreacted and I need to talk through what I could have done differently. So short answer, go to emdria.org, find a therapist, look for someone who's certified, and that's going to be your best bet.
Yeah.
I wonder if you have resources for people who are, if you're in the Dallas area, DFW, Vanessa's training is amazing. Is there a resource to find trainers who use the same kind of curriculum as you do?
I can't guarantee they use the same curriculum that I do. I
Okay.
can say that EMDRIA certifies trainers as well.
Perfect.
So if you go to EMDRIA and click on find a basic training, you're going to probably be solid. There are tons of trainings out there on certain online platforms. I don't know if I can name those or not. But when you go onto EMDRIA, they say up front, these organizations are not recognized for CEUs, for example, with EMDRIA. So I would highly encourage you to find a training from emdria.org. And recognize you can come to Dallas. We have great Airbnbs near the center. I've had people come from California and Tennessee and Louisiana. So you're welcome to come. We would love to have you in Dallas. And I'll throw this out. I'm also available to travel. So if you are part of a group that wants to train your staff, or if you want to get a group of clinicians in your area, maybe you're in private practice, but you've got a network and you want to create a training in your area, I am very open to making that happen as well.
That's great. Yeah, that was going to be my next question is like, let's say someone's like, oh, this Vanessa, she sounds great. How do I learn from her? How do I get trained by her? What would their options be? Obviously going through your organization of the center.
You can, I'll be honest though, Madeline, it's kind of hard to find the training when you go to the center website.
Okay.
Erin's nodding yes.
I know. I'm like, I Google it. I'm like, where is it?
It's really easier if you go to EMDRIA and click on basic training, and then it has a calendar and you can go through, and our next one starts May 16th. So, and we're still have openings. I would really love to have about 6 more slots filled. So we've got openings to make that one happen, and we would love to have whoever wants to come.
And you get to be with Erin.
I will be there.
Erin will be there.
More importantly, you get to meet Erin. And she signs autographs too.
Yeah, she does it all.
Thank you.
That's so great. Well, yeah, I mean, I can probably speak for Avery in saying that I feel so prepared just having gone through your training, and I just had a really, really great experience. So if you're wanting to get trained, if you're looking to, add that to your toolbox of ways to help clients, it feels pretty revolutionary to me and like with my caseload. So I couldn't recommend it higher.
Well, thank you, Madeline. It is a completely different way of doing therapy.
Yeah.
And I'll tell one more story because we'll probably have to wrap up. But had a clinician that worked at the center that came to my training, and I will never forget her. She, as I was doing the introduction and talking about how it's a different way of doing therapy, we don't get the story always. Sometimes we do, but we don't always. And she slammed her hands on the table and said, "But I'm in this for the story."
As many of us are.
And I was sorry with her. I said, this may not be the type of therapy you want to do.
Yeah.
But give me through the training and then let me know. She went on to get certified. She is doing EMDR all over the place and loving it. So if you'll just try it even when it feels uncomfortable and trust the process, amazing things will happen and you will feel much more confident as a clinician. I'm convinced.
Yeah.
And if you don't, call me.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think a lot of us, I mean, not to overgeneralize, I think a lot of us obviously got into this field to help people. But if you're anything like me, you're also nosy and you want to know the story and you
Not
want to
nosy,
know.
curious.
You're
Great
so
reframe.
curious, so curious. And this is a different approach. Like you're saying, Vanessa, you don't have to do EMDR with knowing the whole story. It's not necessary for me to know what happened.
Right?
I can still work with it.
Yeah.
But
In
I know
fact,
how to work. Yeah.
there's something called blind EMDR, and I've done this a couple of times with clients. This is incredibly helpful, particularly with first responders or vets who they don't want to put what they have in their mind in yours because it's just too much, and they're trying to protect you as the clinician, and we don't want our clients to have to protect us. But with blind EMDR, you guide them through the questions, and then you do the bilateral, and again, it's their brain that does the work.
Mhm.
So you just check in with them, what are you noticing, and then that tells you whether to go this way or go that way. So you don't ever even have to know what the actual event was, and
Wow.
they can still find amazing amounts of release, and it helps them because then they are free of having to worry about you. What's the clinician going to think about me that I did this or that, or I experienced this or that?
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
frees up the client so much.
Totally. Well, I just as you're even saying that, I'm remembering as part of the training, Avery can speak to this too. Like we learn how to provide therapy, but also we offer like demonstrations with you for the class to see like what it looks like to do EMDR.
Right?
And by the same token, we get to receive a little bit of EMDR therapy,
Free therapy with training.
which was really
Two for
cool.
one.
Yeah, two for one. And so not only did Avery and I practice on each other, but you got to like kind of offer EMDR to us.
Yeah.
Which Aaron, I have some crazy stories to fill you in on of what I processed with this. It was really cool.
I know exactly what you're talking about too.
It was so
It
cool.
was, but it was beautiful.
Where
It
my
was,
head's going is like, yeah, you think you know your story. You do know your story.
yeah,
Sometimes with EMDR, it kind of feels like the way that I describe like psychedelic assisted therapy to people, ketamine assisted. It's like we have these little ski slopes that we go. We know where we're going. Our mountain is very well defined of these tracks that we follow. And EMDR is kind of like ketamine in the sense that it's fresh powder. You can
yes,
go anywhere,
right,
places you've never thought to go before.
yep.
And doing EMDR with you, Vanessa, I was making connections that I've known this about myself for 15 years. I've had this story for 15 years. I've never thought about it this way.
Yep.
And you didn't have to do anything magical. Like you were
Nope.
doing
I
bilateral
just
and I
I
found
just
it.
moved my fingers, like my 11-year-old client
Amazing.
said. So you're gonna wave your fingers in front of my face, and I'm gonna feel better. It's like, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
You got
Kind of, yeah. Did you have that same experience, Avery, of like finding connections that you hadn't made before or seeing things you hadn't seen before?
Yeah, I think viewing it in a different way from a different perspective. And of course, it's intimidating, right? It reminded me of grad school when you're like not
Mm,
performing, but you're doing it for the class. And EMDR feels very different than that because in typical, and I'm not generalizing, therapy, like you get to kind of decide like what you bring to the table versus an EMDR, you're really trusting the process. And again, trusting the therapist to be able to hold that space and help you navigate it, but you're the one doing all of the work, and so that part felt intimidating, but I think it was really helpful as a therapist to be able to have done EMDR from a client's perspective so that I have a better idea going in of what their experience might be like.
Absolutely, and that's a great point. Basic training, you don't role play because of the way EMDR works in the brain. The adaptive information processing system, you can't fake it.
yeah.
So you can't take on the role of a client and pretend and respond that way. It just doesn't work. But if you will trust the process, the coolest thing is our brain always moves towards healing. It always does. Sometimes it takes a little while to get there, sometimes it takes a long while to get there, but it always is moving towards healing.
Mm.
So,
It's really beautiful. It's really beautiful, and I feel very lucky. I feel very excited to work with this new modality, and I know Erin and Avery probably agree with me on that too. I guess just like in closing, like what do you see for yourself next, Vanessa, when it comes to like the future of EMDR and your involvement with it?
oh, I would love to do more trainings for more people
Yeah.
and be able to focus on that. I still want to see clients because I think it's really important that trainers actually have their, I don't want to be in an ivory tower and just teach. Um,
Mm.
but I recognize I can have a lot more impact on a lot larger group of people if I can train people to go do this than
Yeah.
if I just do it. I can only see so many clients in a day. So I would love to fill my classes. I keep them small, so I will never have more than 20 people in a class. And typically it's around 12 to 16 so that you do get that
Mm.
one-on-one kind of feedback. But if I could do more and more of that, I would be thrilled. I just
Yeah.
really, really love training, and I love seeing clinicians develop new ways of doing therapy and feeling confident in themselves and just really believing, hey, I can help you.
Mm. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, outside of EMDR, I am very curious. As a closing question, what sits on the table next to your chair during session?
What sits on the table next to my chair during session?
Probably a
Do you
tofu.
mean metaphorically, Eric? What do you mean?
Like
No, when
literally?
you're sitting doing session, literally, what sits on that table? Probably a
Oh,
tofu chico.
yes, I do have my Topo Chico. That and um, a piece of paper with pen that I can record their responses to phase 3 of EMDR, which is the negative belief, the positive belief, how disturbing is it, and that kind of thing. Um, I don't take notes between every set, but I do write that down. So that's about it. And then there's a really bad fake plant. It's kind of pathetic. Yeah. I tried
That's
putting a real
awesome.
one in there, and then I was gone for 2 weeks, and
Funny.
I do have my new favorite tool though. If y'all have probably heard of it, I'm an old fogey. It's called Rocketbook, and you can take notes in this notebook, and then put your note in the EHR, and then wipe the page clean. So you don't have to shred anything; it's gone, and you can use it over and over. So it's great for the environment, and it's way less hassle, and you don't have to worry about leaving a paper somewhere that it shouldn't have been. And
Yeah.
so,
That's
love it.
awesome. Not sponsored, but we should be
We've
by
sponsored
Yeah,
a
Rocket.
lot
you
of things today
Yeah.
for free.
oh, and I have to throw out, we haven't talked about this. You can do EMDR virtually, telehealth,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
there's some great platforms, and you'll learn that in basic training with me at least
Yep.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So there's no excuses not to learn EMDR. You can offer it.
absolutely. And the
Oh,
clients love it because there's no homework.
yeah.
That's the
It's
best.
always nice. That's always really nice. Well, gals, do we want to close in our typical fashion of when we have guests on? There's a tradition, Vanessa, that we didn't loop you in on ahead of time.
Awesome.
You don't have to do anything. It's all on us. Vote,
Yeah,
yes,
let's
we
do
want to do
it.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
We like to, when we have a guest, kind of roundtable our favorite thing or what we admire most about our guest or what we appreciate most about our guest. It's also kind of an exercise in you. We've learned being able to accept compliments. That's feedback we've gotten from guests that's like kind of hard. Um, but if you're up for it, we would love to be able to offer that to
Absolutely.
you.
An honor.
I can go first. But I mean, obviously, just your wealth of knowledge, you are so deeply wise and intuitive and bright as a clinician and as a person. I just have loved getting to know you inside and outside of the therapy room and the therapy space. So I really, really admire that about you.
Thank you. Thank you. That feels very warm and fuzzy.
Oh, yay! Yay!
Yeah, I can go next. Vanessa, I've worked with you for a really long time, and even before the EMDR training, your willingness to jump in and help and support and show up, I've really appreciated that through my journey. And you're willing to advocate, your willingness to advocate for people, I really find that so admiring. And of course, your EMDR training and just all of the knowledge that you share. If there's ever a question, like you will find the answer. And I really appreciated that through the EMDR training, but also in general as well.
Thank you. Or I'll make one up.
And that's perfect too. Works for me.
Thank you, Avery. That's awesome. It's fascinating to know the impact you have on someone when you don't really know it. So thank you for that.
Vanessa, I have always admired your ability to combine kindness and boldness. I think you've always been someone that has been so bold and someone that has always inspired me to be bold in the things that I believe in, and to advocate for and be loud about the things that I believe in, while also being incredibly gentle and kind. And I think it definitely shows up in the way that you work with your clients, and it shows up in the way that you teach and you train and you build up and champion your clients and the people that the young clinicians or the not so young clinicians that you work with. It has always been something that I've admired about you, the way that you have been loud about the things you believe in and also incredibly kind.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Y'all are
I'm
amazing.
noticing.
It's been such a blessing to work with each of you. And it was fun at training to get to know Avery and Madeline a little better, other than party planners, which you do extraordinarily. And I really appreciate the chance to be on your podcast. It's quite the honor. This is my first podcast ever.
Ooh, you wouldn't know it. Yeah. That's great. Well, how can we find you? How can our listener find you and reach out to you if they wanted to?
Probably the easiest way is to go to thecentercounseling.org.
Okay.
And if you click on the counseling, like I need help with, go to EMDR, and that'll give you my profile. If you're interested in the training, you can email me from there, and I will get back with you and send you the link. I will throw this out. If you are an LPCA or a graduate student, you are a graduate student in psychology or some type of counseling, then or if you are part of the BIPOC or LGBTQ plus communities, then you get a $300 discount on the training. So email me and I can give you that code. So.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, yeah, we'll link all that in the show notes and we'll make sure that people can find you. And yeah, training, go to Vanessa's training. This should come out next Tuesday. So there's still time if you're hearing this.
There will be still time.
Okay. Thank you for being here, Vanessa. It's so nice to get to talk to you.
So great.
Yeah. We'll go ahead and wrap up, but thank y'all for listening and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.